Monica Harris walked quickly down the quiet streets of her town, her arms carrying a small bag of groceries she had bought after finishing her long shift at the local store. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft orange glow across the neighborhood. Monica liked this time of day, the warmth of the fading sunlight, the calmness in the air, but tonight, something felt different. There was a tension in the streets, a subtle unease that she couldn't quite explain. She kept her head down, trying to ignore the occasional passerby. Monica had always been careful when walking alone, especially in areas where she didn't know everyone. Her life had taught her to be cautious, to notice small details, and to trust her instincts. Yet, she never expected that her caution would not be enough. As she turned the corner near the park, she noticed a group of police officers standing near the entrance. Their presence wasn't unusual, police often patrolled the neighborhood, but something about the way they looked at her made her pause. Their eyes followed her movements more closely than necessary, their expressions unreadable but stern. Monica felt a chill run down her spine. One of the officers stepped forward, blocking her path. "Evening, miss," he said in a tone that was meant to sound friendly but came off as intimidating. Monica smiled politely. "Good evening, officer," she replied. She tried to continue walking, but another officer stepped up on the other side, effectively trapping her. "Where are you going?" the first officer asked. There was no real curiosity in his voice, just a command, a demand for an answer that she didn't need to give. Monica felt her heart rate quicken. She knew from experience that arguing would make things worse. "I'm just heading home," she said calmly, hoping her voice would convey that she meant no trouble. She kept her hands visible, empty, showing that she had nothing to hide. But the officers didn't seem satisfied. They exchanged glances, whispering to one another in low tones. Monica couldn't hear the words, but she could feel the hostility. Suddenly, one of the officers grabbed her arm. "You're coming with us," he said. Monica froze. "Excuse me," she asked, her voice steady despite the rising panic inside her. The officer didn't answer. He tugged her roughly toward the park, where the other officers had gathered. Monica's groceries fell to the ground, spilling their contents. Apples rolled across the pavement, a small but glaring reminder of the chaos unfolding. She tried to pull back gently. "Please, I don't understand. What is this about?" The officers ignored her. Another officer, taller and broader than the rest, stepped forward and spoke harshly. "You know what you did," he said, though Monica had no idea what he meant. She shook her head, confused and scared. The group of officers forced her toward a large tree at the edge of the park. It was an old oak, its branches reaching high into the sky, its trunk wide and sturdy. The officers tied her hands to the tree with thick rope, pulling it tight enough to prevent her from moving. Monica felt the rope bite into her wrists. She struggled slightly, but she knew that resistance would only make things worse. As she stood there, bound and confused, she looked around. A few residents had begun to gather, keeping a cautious distance. Some were children who peeked from behind their parents' legs, wide-eyed and whispering. Others were adults, recording the incident on their phones, unsure whether to intervene or wait for it to end. Monica's mind raced. She couldn't understand why this was happening. She had never had trouble with the police before. She had always followed the rules, kept her head down, and lived quietly. The officers began to taunt her, their words sharp and cruel. They accused her of things she hadn't done, using the weight of their authority to intimidate her. Monica's cheeks flushed, not just from embarrassment but from a growing anger. She had never been treated like this before. The words cut deep, but she refused to show the fear that they wanted to see. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. Nearby, some of the onlookers whispered to one another. "Why are they doing this?" one woman asked, her voice trembling. "She's done nothing wrong." Another man shook his head in disbelief. "It's the way they treat people here," he muttered. Monica could hear the murmurs, and for a brief moment, she felt a small comfort in knowing that she wasn't entirely alone. People were watching. Someone might speak up, someone might help. The officers, however, seemed oblivious to the growing tension around them. They laughed among themselves, making crude jokes and sneering at Monica's discomfort. Their behavior was reckless, fueled by arrogance and prejudice. Monica tried to keep her composure, reminding herself that this was temporary, that she needed to stay calm and think clearly. As the minutes passed, Monica's mind wandered to her family. Her parents, her younger brother. What would they think if they saw her like this? She hoped they weren't nearby, witnessing this injustice. She thought about her friends at work, who would be shocked to see what had happened. The thought of their worry made her stomach twist, but it also strengthened her resolve. She would not let fear control her. She would endure this, and she would find a way to make sure it ended justly. Suddenly, one of the officers leaned in closer, speaking in a low, menacing tone. "You should know better than to act out here," he said. Monica looked at him directly, her eyes steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "I haven't acted out," she replied. "I'm just walking home." Her voice was calm, firm, unshaken. She hoped her words would reach some part of their conscience, but she knew that in situations like this, reason rarely prevailed. The officers pulled back, glancing at one another. They whispered again, their voices heavy with confusion and irritation. Monica couldn't hear the words, but she sensed the shift in their demeanor. Something had unsettled them, though she didn't know what it was. She stayed still, tied to the tree, waiting for the next move. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Monica's wrists throbbed from the tight ropes, her legs ached from standing, and her mind raced with questions and fears. She had never imagined that her evening walk would end like this. The calm streets she had walked down just moments ago now felt hostile, unrecognizable. She felt the eyes of the officers on her, their gazes heavy with judgment and malice. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw a small group of neighbors approaching, moving cautiously but deliberately. Their presence gave her a spark of hope. Maybe someone would step in, maybe someone would call the authorities. She clutched at that hope, holding onto it like a lifeline. Monica's mind continued to spin with thoughts of how this could end. She tried to stay focused, thinking about what she could say, what she could do, how she could stay safe. She knew that reacting with anger or panic could worsen the situation. She reminded herself to breathe, to stay calm, to be patient. The officers, meanwhile, seemed increasingly frustrated. They muttered under their breath, glancing at each other as if debating what to do next. Monica listened carefully, noting every change in their tone, every shift in their behavior. She realized that they were unsure, uncertain about how to handle the situation. That uncertainty, she hoped, might be her advantage. As the sky darkened and the evening settled into night, Monica remained tied to the tree, surrounded by a small crowd of onlookers, her heart pounding but her mind clear. She knew that the next moments would be crucial. Something had to happen. Either the officers would release her, or this injustice would escalate further. She took a deep breath, bracing herself for whatever was to come, determined to face it with courage and dignity. Even as fear threatened to overwhelm her, Monica held on to one thought: she would survive this, and one way or another, justice would be done. The evening had grown darker, and the small park seemed almost empty except for the group that had gathered around Monica. The soft glow of the streetlights cast long shadows, making the scene even more tense. Monica remained tied to the tree, her wrists sore, her mind alert. She could hear whispers from the crowd, a mixture of concern, fear, and disbelief. Some were quietly recording on their phones, while others nervously whispered to one another. The officers, meanwhile, were beginning to grow impatient. One of them muttered under his breath, clearly frustrated that the situation wasn't resolving itself. Another paced back and forth, his heavy boots crunching against the gravel path, and occasionally glancing at Monica with a look that was part anger, part confusion. Their overconfidence from earlier had started to fade, replaced by the awareness that the moment was attracting attention, something they hadn't considered before. Monica's mind raced as she tried to assess her options. She was bound to the tree, surrounded by men who clearly had the power to escalate the situation further. She thought about yelling for help, but then realized that loud sounds might provoke them even more. Instead, she focused on staying calm, steadying her breathing, and trying to read their behavior. Every twitch of their fingers, every glance exchanged, could give her clues about what might happen next. A woman from the small crowd finally stepped forward, keeping her distance but holding her phone up. "Hey, you can't treat her like that," she shouted. Her voice was shaky but firm, filled with indignation. The officers ignored her, but Monica felt a spark of hope. People were watching. The more witnesses there were, the harder it would be for the officers to act without consequences. Another man, older and grayer, moved a little closer, his arms crossed, clearly trying to show his disapproval without provoking violence. "She hasn't done anything wrong," he said quietly, though the officers could still hear him. Monica's heart lifted slightly, knowing that some members of the community were willing to speak up, even in the face of potential danger. One of the officers, the tallest one, seemed to grow more aggressive. He stepped closer to Monica, his face twisted with impatience. "Do you have something to say for yourself?" he demanded. Monica shook her head gently. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just going home," she said, her voice calm but firm. She refused to show fear, even though every nerve in her body was tense. The officers exchanged looks, clearly unsure of what to do next. They muttered among themselves, sometimes raising their voices in frustration. Monica noticed that their tone had shifted slightly. Earlier, they had been confident, almost cruelly playful in their intimidation, but now they seemed hesitant. She could sense a crack in their confidence, a tiny opening that might help her. Meanwhile, the small crowd continued to grow. Word of the incident had begun to spread down the streets. Some neighbors had called friends and family, while others contacted local community leaders. The presence of more witnesses put additional pressure on the officers, though they tried to hide their concern behind stern expressions. Monica, tied to the tree, could see the officers' unease, and it gave her a quiet strength. Minutes passed like hours. Monica's wrists throbbed with pain, and her legs were beginning to ache from standing, but she forced herself to remain steady. She thought about her life, about the people she loved, and about the principles she had always tried to follow. She had never imagined being treated like this, yet she refused to let fear control her actions. Her resolve was growing stronger with each passing moment. The officers began to grow more restless. One of them reached into his pocket, possibly for a radio or phone, and spoke in a low, urgent tone. Monica couldn't hear what he said, but she could see that the conversation was not going well. The other officers were nodding occasionally, their expressions a mixture of concern and confusion. The situation was no longer under their control, and the realization seemed to frustrate them further. A young man from the crowd finally spoke up, his voice loud and commanding. "Let her go. This is not right." His words were met with murmurs of agreement from others nearby. The officers glanced at the growing crowd, their attention momentarily diverted from Monica. She seized the opportunity to speak again, her voice firm, clear, and calm. "Please, release me. I have done nothing wrong." The officer who had grabbed her initially looked at her, his expression unreadable. For a brief moment, the tension between them was palpable. Monica could feel the fear and hesitation in him, a rare glimpse behind the mask of authority. She kept her tone steady, speaking not out of fear but with a quiet confidence, the kind that comes from knowing you are right and the world is watching. Some members of the crowd had begun to record the incident with their phones. The camera lights flickered softly in the dark, capturing every movement, every word. Monica knew that these recordings could be important. Evidence of injustice was often ignored when unseen, but when recorded, it could not be dismissed. The thought gave her a sense of control over a situation that had seemed entirely beyond her power. As the tension in the air thickened, Monica noticed that one officer seemed particularly nervous. He shifted from foot to foot, muttering to himself, and avoided eye contact with the crowd. Monica realized that his earlier confidence had completely vanished. This gave her hope. The officers were not invincible, they were human, subject to doubt, fear, and consequences. The officers huddled together briefly, speaking in low tones. Monica couldn't hear their words, but she could see the anxiety on their faces. The once assertive group now looked uncertain, their arrogance fading under the weight of public scrutiny. Monica felt a small surge of courage, realizing that this moment was turning in her favor. Suddenly, a voice called from the distance. "What's going on here?" It was firm, authoritative, yet calm. Monica looked up and saw a middle-aged man approaching quickly, walking with purpose. He was dressed in a suit, clearly not part of the park's usual evening crowd. The officers immediately straightened, their earlier bravado faltering further. The man glanced at Monica, his eyes sharp and calculating, then turned to the officers with a look that suggested he knew exactly what had happened. Monica, still tied to the tree, felt a glimmer of relief. Someone in a position of authority was here, someone who could intervene. The officers, however, seemed unaware of the full implications. They began to mutter excuses, their voices rising slightly in panic. Monica realized that this moment could change everything if she stayed calm and allowed the situation to unfold naturally. The crowd sensed the shift in energy. The tension that had hung over the park like a heavy cloud seemed to lift slightly as the man's presence commanded attention. People whispered among themselves, recognizing the seriousness of the situation. Monica felt her heart pound with anticipation and anxiety, but also with a growing sense of hope. She had endured the officer's cruelty for long enough, and now the situation was about to change. The officers were forced to step back slightly, their hands no longer on Monica but hovering near her as if uncertain what to do. Monica's wrists still ached, but her spirit was lifting. She realized that remaining calm, speaking clearly, and relying on the evidence and witnesses had begun to work. The tide was turning. The man in the suit finally spoke, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Step away from her." The authority in his tone left no room for argument. The officers hesitated, clearly weighing the consequences, but finally obeyed. Monica's heart leapt with relief. She was still tied to the tree, but the immediate threat of further violence had diminished. The crowd murmured approval, some clapping softly, others recording the unfolding events. Monica's mind raced, thinking about what would happen next. She knew that while the immediate danger had passed, the situation was far from over. She would need to explain, to clarify, and to ensure that justice was served. But for now, the presence of someone in authority gave her hope and a moment to breathe. Monica's attention shifted to the officers, who were now visibly shaken, their earlier arrogance replaced with uncertainty. Their eyes darted around, seeking validation or approval from someone, anyone. Monica knew that the balance of power had shifted. They were no longer in complete control, and she could sense the fear in their movements and expressions. As the evening continued, Monica remained tied to the tree, surrounded by the watchful eyes of the community and the presence of the authoritative man who had intervened. The officers whispered among themselves, trying to determine their next move, but their hesitation was clear. Monica's mind focused on staying calm, maintaining dignity, and preparing for the revelation that would change everything. She knew one thing with certainty, the ordeal was far from over, but she had survived the first stage. The community was watching, the officers were faltering, and someone in power had taken notice. Monica Harris, bound to the tree but unbroken in spirit, understood that this was just the beginning of a story that would demand truth, accountability, and courage. The authoritative man in the suit stepped closer to the officers, his expression stern, but calm. His presence alone made the group stiffen, their earlier confidence completely vanished. Monica could feel the shift in the air, what had seemed like an impossible situation was slowly tilting in her favor. The man's eyes, sharp and observant, moved over the scene with quiet judgment. He wasn't just another witness, there was authority in his posture, in the way he carried himself, in the way the officers instinctively responded to him. Monica's heart pounded in her chest, a mix of fear and cautious hope. She had survived the first wave of intimidation, but now, she had to ensure that this opportunity was used wisely. She stayed silent for a moment, letting the tension in the park build. She knew the officers were trying to guess who this man was and what his interest in the situation might be. Every second of delay gave her strength, every pause added weight to the upcoming revelation. Finally, the man addressed the officers directly. "Explain why she is tied to that tree," he said, his voice low but commanding, the kind that brooked no excuses. The officers shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure how to respond. One of them muttered something about a misunderstanding, while another tried to claim they were following orders. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, showing that such vague answers would not suffice. Monica realized this was her moment. She gathered her courage, straightened her shoulders, and spoke clearly. "I haven't done anything wrong," she said. "I was walking home when they stopped me and tied me here. I don't understand why they did this." Her voice, steady and calm, carried a firmness that made the officers flinch. It wasn't just fear, there was authority in her tone, a quiet reminder that she was a human being deserving of respect. The man in the suit raised an eyebrow, and for a moment, Monica thought he might ask her more questions. Instead, he turned slightly toward the crowd and spoke into his phone. Monica couldn't hear the words clearly, but she could see the immediate reaction of the officers. Their expressions shifted from nervousness to alarm. One of them whispered something urgently, while another fidgeted, his eyes darting toward the approaching sound of more footsteps. Soon, a small motorcade of black SUVs rolled into the park, the headlights cutting through the darkening evening. Security personnel emerged, moving quickly and efficiently. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The officers, who had been intimidating moments ago, now looked vulnerable and uncertain. Monica could barely believe what was happening. The arrival of these vehicles signaled something monumental, a force that the officers clearly did not expect. The authoritative man on the scene finally revealed his identity. "Monica Harris, are you all right?" he asked, his voice now tinged with concern. Monica's eyes widened slightly. "Yes," she said cautiously, unsure how he would react to her being tied to the tree. The man turned to the officers, his voice firm and unmistakably commanding. "These officers have tied my wife to a tree without any reason. Explain yourselves." The officers froze. The words struck them like lightning. Monica could see their shock and disbelief. Their faces went pale, their earlier arrogance evaporating instantly. One of them stammered, "Sir, we didn't, we thought," but the explanation faltered under the weight of reality. They had no words that could undo the mistake, no excuses that could erase the humiliation and fear they had caused. Monica's heart raced as she realized the truth of the situation had finally dawned on the officers. The woman they had treated with such cruelty was not just anyone. She was the wife of a man whose authority and influence were undeniable. In that instant, the balance of power shifted completely. The fear and tension that had hung in the park moments ago now belonged entirely to the officers. The man, Monica's husband, walked up to the tree, his steps measured but filled with purpose. He stopped a few feet away, looking at his wife with a mix of concern, anger, and relief. Monica's wrists still throbbed, but seeing him brought a sense of safety she hadn't felt since the ordeal began. The officers avoided his gaze, each one silently acknowledging the gravity of the situation. He gestured to the officers to untie Monica immediately. "Take her down now," he commanded. Two officers stepped forward reluctantly, their hands trembling slightly as they loosened the ropes around her wrists. Monica flexed her sore arms as the bonds fell away, grateful for the small but vital relief. She felt a mixture of pain from the rope and a surge of empowerment, knowing that the truth had finally come to light. As she stood free, her husband took her hand gently, guiding her to a safer spot under the soft light of the street lamps. The crowd around them watched silently, some clapping softly, others whispering in amazement. Monica could feel their support, their recognition that justice, even delayed, had arrived. She glanced back at the officers, their faces still filled with disbelief and regret. The shame of their actions was now clear to everyone present. The man addressed the officers directly, his voice low but cold with authority. "You will all face consequences for your actions. This is not just about protocol, it is about human decency, respect, and the law. You failed in every aspect, and now you will answer for it." Monica could hear the weight of truth in his words. The officers swallowed hard, realizing that their mistakes were irreversible, and the consequences were unavoidable. Monica's mind raced as she processed the unfolding events. Moments ago, she had been helpless, tied to a tree, vulnerable to those who held power over her. Now, she was free, supported by her husband, surrounded by witnesses, and with the knowledge that the truth would not be ignored. She felt a mixture of relief, gratitude, and quiet triumph. The injustice she had endured was not erased, but it was now confronted in the most undeniable way. The officers attempted to speak, but the authoritative man held up a hand, signaling silence. He turned to Monica, his voice gentle now, filled with concern. "Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" Monica shook her head, though she acknowledged the aches and bruises that had formed. "I'm fine," she said softly. "I just want this to end peacefully." The crowd began to disperse slowly, some still recording, others murmuring about what had just happened. The tension in the park lessened, replaced by a sense of resolution. Monica's husband stayed close, offering quiet support and reassurance. The officers remained, standing awkwardly, fully aware that they had crossed a line that could never be ignored. Monica finally spoke, her voice firm but calm. "I hope this serves as a lesson," she said, her eyes meeting those of the officers. "Power does not give anyone the right to harm or humiliate others. Respect is not optional, it is required." Her words carried weight, amplified by the presence of witnesses and the undeniable truth of her identity. The officers nodded, their expressions a mixture of guilt, fear, and resignation. They understood that their actions would be reported, documented, and held accountable. Monica had turned a moment of fear and vulnerability into a statement of courage and integrity. The experience, painful as it had been, had also highlighted the importance of truth, authority, and the courage to stand up against injustice. As Monica and her husband walked away from the tree, she felt a sense of closure, though the memory of the event would linger. She knew that what had happened could have been far worse, but the intervention of authority, the presence of witnesses, and her own calm resolve had prevented tragedy. The evening had begun with fear and uncertainty, but it ended with clarity, truth, and a reaffirmation of justice. The officers remained at a distance, their postures subdued, no longer the figures of intimidation they had once been. The lesson of the evening was clear: arrogance, prejudice, and misuse of power would not go unnoticed, especially when faced with truth and integrity. Monica had endured, spoken, and survived, and the community had seen the full measure of what had occurred. For Monica, the ordeal was not just about personal survival, it was about standing firm against injustice, ensuring that the voices of the oppressed were heard, and demonstrating that courage, dignity, and truth could overcome fear and intimidation. The events of the evening would remain in the minds of those present, a story of resilience and justice that would be told and remembered. As the last of the witnesses left and the park grew quiet once more, Monica and her husband walked hand in hand, their steps slow but confident. She had endured what many could not imagine, but she had emerged stronger, vindicated, and respected. The officer's mistake would be recorded, scrutinized, and remembered, a cautionary tale of the dangers of prejudice and the power of truth. Monica paused for a moment, looking back at the tree where she had been tied. The memory of fear lingered, but so did the knowledge that justice had arrived. She had been vulnerable, yet she had remained courageous. She had been alone, yet she was supported. She had been underestimated, yet she had revealed a truth that could not be ignored. The experience would shape her, her husband, and the community, a reminder that dignity, courage, and truth could triumph even in the darkest moments. After the dramatic events in the park, Monica and her husband returned home. The streets were quieter now, the tension of the evening slowly giving way to a mixture of relief and reflection. Monica's mind was still racing, thinking about everything that had happened: the fear, the humiliation, and the unexpected arrival of her husband, who had turned the entire situation around. She could hardly believe that just hours ago she had been tied to a tree, facing officers who had acted without reason or respect. Now, she was safe, surrounded by care, and fully aware of her husband's unwavering support. At home, the first thing Monica did was take a long, hot shower. The water washed over her, carrying away the dirt, sweat, and physical remnants of the ordeal. She focused on each movement, letting the steam calm her racing mind. Her arms were sore, the skin bruised and tender from the rope, but the physical pain was secondary to the emotional exhaustion that weighed on her. She ran her fingers over the marks on her wrists and thought about how quickly life could change. One moment, she had been walking peacefully; the next, she had been in danger, at the mercy of people who had misused their power. Her husband, Robert, gave her the space she needed but stayed nearby, preparing tea and a warm towel. He was calm, collected, and careful not to overwhelm her. Monica appreciated his quiet strength. She knew he was processing the events just as deeply, but his priority was her well-being. After a few minutes, he handed her a cup of tea and a soft towel. "You're safe now," he said simply. His words were gentle but carried authority, reassurance, and love. Monica nodded, grateful for his presence and for the fact that he had arrived when she needed him the most. As Monica sipped her tea, her thoughts turned back to the officers. She knew the story would not end simply with her being untied. The consequences of their actions were inevitable. There would be investigations, reports, and perhaps disciplinary measures. She realized that her role now extended beyond personal relief. She had to ensure that justice was served and that such abuse of power would not go unpunished. It was an overwhelming thought, but Monica had never been one to avoid responsibility. Robert joined her at the table, and they began discussing the next steps. "We need to document everything," he said, his tone serious but calm. "Photos of your injuries, witness statements, and any recordings from the park. This will make sure there's a clear record of what happened." Monica nodded, appreciating his practical approach. She knew that clear evidence was essential, and she felt empowered knowing they could take action together. The fear she had experienced earlier was still present, but it was now tempered by a sense of purpose and control. Over the next few days, Monica and Robert worked tirelessly to gather everything needed for the investigation. Monica spoke with several witnesses who had been in the park that evening. Their statements were detailed and consistent, recounting the officers' aggressive behavior, Monica being tied to the tree, and her husband's intervention. The witnesses were shocked by the officers' actions but relieved that Monica had come to no lasting harm. Their support gave Monica confidence that the truth would prevail, that accountability would follow, and that her experience would not be dismissed or forgotten. Monica also prepared a detailed written account of the events. She described the officer's behavior, her fear, the humiliation, and the physical pain caused by being tied to the tree. She included the moments when she had tried to remain calm, when she had hoped for intervention, and the sudden relief when her husband had arrived. Writing it down was difficult, revisiting the trauma, but it also provided a sense of clarity and control. By putting her experiences into words, Monica was reclaiming her narrative, turning what had been an experience of vulnerability into one of courage and strength. Meanwhile, Robert used his connections to ensure the matter was addressed swiftly. He communicated with the police department's oversight office, providing the evidence they had collected and emphasizing the need for immediate action. He made it clear that this was not just about discipline but about sending a message: abuse of authority, prejudice, and unlawful treatment could not be tolerated. Monica observed his efforts with quiet admiration, recognizing the skill, determination, and strategic thinking he brought to the situation. Together, they formed a strong front, one committed to justice and integrity. As the investigation unfolded, Monica received messages of support from friends, family, and community members who had heard about the incident. People expressed their shock and anger at what had happened, but also their admiration for Monica's courage. Some had witnessed the incident from a distance and were grateful that she had emerged safely. Others were inspired by her strength, seeing in her experience a reminder that standing firm in the face of injustice could bring about change. Monica felt a deep sense of connection with her community, realizing that she was not alone and that her voice mattered. The officers involved were placed on administrative leave immediately, pending a full investigation. Internal reviews and external oversight processes were initiated to ensure that every aspect of the incident was examined. Monica was informed that disciplinary actions, training programs, and sensitivity courses were being considered, not only for the individuals involved but also to prevent similar incidents in the future. She felt a sense of relief knowing that steps were being taken to hold the officers accountable, and that the system, though slow at times, could still deliver justice. Despite the public attention and the stress of legal proceedings, Monica also took time to care for herself. She resumed her daily routine slowly, allowing herself moments of reflection and calm. She returned to her favorite hobbies, walked in the park now with greater awareness but no fear, and spent quiet evenings with Robert, reconnecting and rebuilding the sense of normalcy that had been disrupted. She recognized the importance of healing emotionally and physically, understanding that resilience was not just about surviving but also about thriving afterward. As weeks passed, the investigation reached its final stages. The officers were formally reprimanded and faced consequences for their actions. Monica's story became a part of community awareness campaigns, illustrating the importance of integrity, respect, and accountability within law enforcement. The narrative highlighted not only the mistakes made but also the power of truth, courage, and proper intervention. Monica and Robert participated in discussions and panels, sharing insights on standing up against injustice and promoting respect for all individuals, regardless of background or circumstance. Through the experience, Monica's perspective on life deepened. She understood the fragility of safety, the importance of vigilance, and the value of supportive relationships. She reflected on the moments of fear and helplessness, acknowledging the vulnerability she had felt, but also the strength she had discovered within herself. The ordeal had been harsh, but it had also reinforced her belief in the principles of fairness, respect, and justice. She had endured, spoken up, and contributed to meaningful change. Monica also began mentoring young people in her community, emphasizing the importance of standing up for oneself and others. She encouraged them to act with courage when faced with injustice and to document and report wrongdoings responsibly. Her story became a source of inspiration, teaching that no matter how powerless one might feel in the moment, truth and integrity could bring about real impact. The lessons she had learned firsthand were now being shared widely, creating a ripple effect of awareness, accountability, and empowerment. As Monica and Robert looked back on the events, they realized that while the experience had been frightening, it had also strengthened their bond. They had faced a severe challenge together, navigating fear, uncertainty, and public scrutiny. Their partnership, trust, and mutual support had been crucial in overcoming the ordeal. They appreciated not only their personal connection but also the power of collective action, how community support, legal accountability, and courage could converge to restore justice. The park where Monica had been tied to the tree eventually returned to its quiet, everyday rhythm. Yet, for those who knew the story, it became a symbol of resilience and accountability. Monica's experience was not forgotten, it was remembered as a turning point where injustice was confronted, and where courage and truth triumphed. People who frequented the park reflected on the lessons it carried, thinking about the importance of vigilance, community responsibility, and standing against wrongdoing. Monica often visited the park later, walking slowly along the paths, appreciating the sunlight, the trees, and the sense of normalcy that had returned. She understood that life could change in an instant, that challenges could appear without warning, but also that strength, courage, and the support of loved ones could carry one through even the darkest moments. Each visit reminded her of the ordeal, but it also reminded her of the victory, the restoration of dignity, justice, and respect. As the months went by, Monica continued to be a voice for fairness and integrity. She collaborated with local organizations to promote awareness about the proper conduct of authority figures, emphasizing accountability and ethical behavior. Her work helped influence policies, inspired change, and created safer environments for everyone. Monica's personal experience had transformed into a platform for broader impact, turning what had been a traumatic event into a force for good. Through it all, Monica never lost sight of the lessons learned during those terrifying moments tied to a tree. She understood the fragility of power, the importance of speaking up, and the need to act with both courage and clarity. She had faced fear, humiliation, and uncertainty but emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined. Her story was no longer just about a single incident, it was about resilience, justice, and the transformative power of truth. After months of dealing with the aftermath of the incident, Monica began to notice a shift in her life. The initial shock, fear, and stress had gradually turned into a deep understanding of her own strength. Each day, she woke up feeling more confident, more determined, and more focused on the things she could control. The experience had changed her, not by breaking her, but by teaching her the value of resilience, courage, and careful decision-making. Monica and Robert continued their involvement with community awareness programs. They worked together on projects that educated people about the importance of speaking out against injustice, respecting authority responsibly, and fostering safe public spaces. Monica often shared her story, not just as a recounting of her ordeal, but as a lesson in vigilance and courage. She explained how fear might freeze someone in a moment of crisis, but preparation, awareness, and support could turn fear into action. Her talks resonated with many, inspiring people to stand up for themselves and others. Meanwhile, Monica also focused on rebuilding her personal routines. She returned to work with renewed energy and purpose. The challenges she had faced gave her a new perspective on problem solving and communication. She noticed how calmly and effectively she could handle stressful situations, even when unexpected obstacles arose. Her colleagues noticed the change as well, they appreciated her clarity, her patience, and the way she could encourage teamwork even during difficult projects. Monica felt proud of how she had transformed adversity into a source of strength, using her experience to grow both personally and professionally. At home, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Monica and Robert spent more quality time together, cherishing small moments of laughter, conversation, and shared reflection. They would often sit in their garden in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the horizon, and talk about the past, the lessons learned, and their hopes for the future. These moments, simple yet profound, reminded them that life was fragile but also full of opportunity. They understood that happiness was not just about avoiding danger, but about facing challenges with courage, supporting one another, and appreciating the present. Monica also began mentoring younger women in her community. She encouraged them to pursue education, build confidence, and be aware of their surroundings. She emphasized the importance of trusting their instincts, preparing for unforeseen challenges, and seeking support when needed. Monica's guidance was practical and empathetic, drawn from her own real-life experiences. She explained how even when situations seemed unfair or frightening, there were always steps one could take to protect oneself and advocate for justice. Many young women found Monica's story inspiring. They admired her ability to turn a frightening experience into a lesson of empowerment. Over time, the legal process concerning the officers concluded. The internal investigation had led to strict disciplinary actions. 2 officers faced formal reprimands and mandatory retraining in professional conduct, while others were involved in ongoing reviews to ensure accountability. Monica felt a sense of closure as she witnessed these actions, knowing that the system, though slow at times, had upheld justice. It was not just about punishing wrongdoing but about creating awareness, setting boundaries, and ensuring that similar incidents would be less likely in the future. The outcome reinforced Monica's belief that standing up for oneself and seeking truth was always worthwhile. Despite the conclusion of the legal process, Monica remained committed to advocacy. She worked with local organizations to create workshops and seminars that trained people on how to safely report misconduct and protect themselves in potentially harmful situations. She spoke to police trainees, students, and community leaders, sharing insights on respect, responsibility, and the consequences of abusing authority. Monica's approach was firm yet compassionate. She encouraged understanding and empathy, alongside accountability and courage. Her message was clear: fairness and respect were essential in every interaction, and every individual had the right to dignity and safety. The experience also strengthened Monica's relationship with her family. They were proud of her resilience, her determination, and her commitment to justice. They spent more time together, creating traditions that brought joy, laughter, and connection. Family dinners, weekend outings, and small celebrations became moments of bonding, reminding Monica of the importance of love, care, and support in navigating life's challenges. Her family's encouragement reinforced her confidence, making her feel grounded and motivated to continue her advocacy and personal growth. Robert and Monica also took time to nurture their own goals. They traveled together, exploring new places and cultures, and using these experiences to learn more about the world and themselves. These journeys were a chance to leave behind stress and fear, even temporarily, and embrace adventure, curiosity, and shared discovery. They found joy in simple activities like walking through city streets, tasting local foods, and engaging with communities around them. These experiences reminded them that life had beauty and richness beyond challenges, and that resilience could coexist with joy, laughter, and exploration. In her personal life, Monica also found time to reflect and journal. She wrote down her thoughts, dreams, and memories, often revisiting the difficult moments and examining how they had shaped her. Writing became a form of therapy, allowing her to process lingering emotions and celebrate her progress. She noticed patterns of growth: how fear had transformed into courage, confusion into clarity, and helplessness into empowerment. Through this reflection, Monica gained insight into herself, her strengths, and her capacity to handle life's uncertainties. Monica's story gradually became known beyond her immediate community. Local newspapers and online platforms shared her experience, focusing on her resilience and her efforts to promote awareness. People wrote to her expressing admiration, gratitude, and support. Some shared their own experiences of injustice, finding comfort and inspiration in Monica's story. She realized that by speaking her truth and taking action, she was creating a ripple effect of courage and empowerment. Her experience, once a personal struggle, had become a source of hope for many. Through all of this, Monica never forgot the importance of preparation, observation, and calmness in critical moments. She continued to walk in the park, now with confidence and mindfulness, always aware but never fearful. She understood that challenges could arise unexpectedly, but her mindset had shifted. She knew that fear could be managed, obstacles could be overcome, and support systems, whether family, friends, or community, were invaluable. Monica's experience had taught her that strength was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Monica also began to focus on helping others in professional settings. She introduced training programs at work that encouraged teamwork, respect, and ethical decision-making. She worked to ensure that workplaces were inclusive, fair, and safe for everyone. Her efforts were appreciated by colleagues and leaders alike, who recognized the practical impact of her guidance and the strength of her advocacy. Monica realized that her influence extended beyond her personal story. She was shaping environments where respect, dignity, and accountability were valued and upheld. As Monica and Robert celebrated the first anniversary after the incident, they reflected on how much had changed. What had started as a terrifying and humiliating experience had transformed their lives in ways they could never have imagined. They had grown closer as a couple, become stronger as individuals, and developed a sense of purpose that extended to their community. The incident had left marks, both physical and emotional, but it had also provided opportunities for growth, understanding, and connection. Monica's journey became a testament to the power of resilience, courage, and proactive action. She had faced fear head-on, sought justice, and used her experience to educate, empower, and inspire others. Her story highlighted that even in moments of vulnerability, people could find strength, support, and a path toward meaningful change. Monica understood that life was unpredictable, but the choices she made, anchored in courage, clarity, and compassion, could shape outcomes in profound ways. Ultimately, Monica's life returned to a sense of normalcy, but it was a new normal, one enriched by lessons learned, connections strengthened, and purpose discovered. She had confronted injustice, reclaimed her dignity, and helped create safer, more respectful spaces for others. Her journey, though born of adversity, became a story of hope, empowerment, and transformation. Monica knew that challenges would continue to arise, but she now faced them with confidence, knowing that resilience, courage, and the support of loved ones could carry her through anything. Even as Monica moved forward, she never let complacency take root. She continued to stay vigilant, advocate for fairness, and encourage others to act with courage and integrity. Her experience had instilled a lifelong commitment to justice, responsibility, and awareness. She understood that one incident, no matter how traumatic, could become a catalyst for personal growth and communal benefit if approached with clarity, courage, and dedication. In the end, Monica's story was not just about what had happened in the park or the ordeal she had endured. It was about transformation, empowerment, and the ripple effects of standing up for what was right. It was about recognizing fear, confronting it, and emerging stronger on the other side. It was about partnership, family support, and the power of community to validate experiences, amplify voices, and ensure accountability. Most importantly, it was about the courage to continue, even when life presented unexpected and frightening challenges. Monica's life, once shadowed by fear and uncertainty, had been illuminated by resilience, courage, and love. She had faced the worst moments of her life with strength, had reclaimed her dignity, and had turned her experience into a tool for positive change. Each day, she walked with confidence, mindful of the past but focused on the future. She knew that life could be unpredictable, but she also knew that every challenge carried the potential for growth, learning, and empowerment. Monica's story was a reminder that even in the face of injustice, hope, courage, and perseverance could guide the way forward. By sharing her journey, Monica inspired countless people to recognize their own strength, stand up for themselves, and act with integrity. Her story reminded everyone that resilience is built through action, courage, and support, and that no one had to face challenges alone. Through her advocacy, mentorship, and personal example, Monica became a symbol of hope and empowerment. She had turned her most difficult experience into a lifelong mission to help others navigate fear, embrace strength, and create safer, more respectful communities. And so, Monica's life continued, not defined by the incident that once shook her, but by the strength, courage, and impact she carried forward. She walked each day with purpose, compassion, and awareness, knowing that while challenges would come, she had the tools, the support, and the inner strength to meet them with grace. Monica's story, born from fear and injustice, had grown into a testament to the human spirit, a tale of resilience, and a guide for anyone seeking courage in the face of adversity.